Hi everyone, I am Cris from Simply Classic. Welcome to my YouTube channel where we take some inspiration and some creativity to make something our own. First, before we talk about our project today, I want to thank all of my subscribers very, very much. I am so thankful for y'all. I am so excited about people subscribing to my channel, and it just makes me want to do more, and I've got all kinds of projects lined up. So thank you. And if you're new, you just found me, please subscribe. If you like what you see, subscribe. And it's just gonna help me continue to bring you videos and know that you like what I'm doing. Leave comments for me, good or bad. If they're bad, tell me what I can do different. I know sometimes the angle of the camera isn't the best, and you'll see some of that in today's video. But please, don't hesitate to comment. If you have a bag that you really like and you want to recreate and you're not sure how to do it, email it to me. My email address is Cris, C-H-R-I-S, @simplyclassic.net, and I'd be happy to take a look at it and see what we can do. So in our last video, I showed you how to make a pattern for this bag here. It is a Tory Burch mini bucket bag. So in today's video, I'm going to show you how to make the bucket bag. There are a couple small pattern changes that I talk about throughout the video, but when it's all said and done, here it is. It's so cute. It's little. It's cute though. So I do have a crossbody strap here, and I have a buckle on it. So I'm going to show you how to do that. But otherwise, it is cute. Now, again, it's not a huge bag, and I'm a tote bag girl. So for me, there's definitely a time and a place for a smaller bag. And if you want a smaller bag with some style, this is it. There's no doubt in my mind. So go ahead, watch the video, make yourself one, then email me a picture. I want to see what y'all do. You don't have to do the same thing I do, and I give you little hints throughout to maybe show you how to, or suggest how to change it up a little bit. And I want to see what y'all get from these videos and what you create. So without further ado, let's get started. So before we get started, I want to go over the pattern pieces and some of the things you're going to need to finish this bag. The first thing you're going to need is the pattern that we did in our last video. Now, I wanted to just point out a couple of things. If you want your bag to be taller and slimmer, so taller and skinnier, let's say, then you're going to reduce your corners. Right now in our pattern, we had it at 2.75 by 2.75. It's going to make a fairly fat and short bag. So if you want yours taller and slimmer, you're going to reduce this to maybe 2 by 2. That's the first thing. The second thing is, because this is a square, you can really change this pattern to any width or height that you want. So the pattern that we created in the last video was just kind of a guide for you to learn how to do it and understand the concept of it, but you really need to do it the size you want so that you can make it your own. So we're going to need our pattern. We're also going to need a strap connector. This is going to be for our D-rings so that we can hang our strap. I just did one long piece. My hardware is 1-inch hardware, so I made it 2 inches wide. This is about, I think 10 inches long. We're probably not going to need quite that much, but I just folded the edges into the middle and then stitched down each side. So it's going to be for my strap connectors. The other thing we're going to need is 2 tabs so that we can put our magnetic snap on there, because on the inside it did have a magnetic snap to hold it closed in the middle. So what I did is I just cut a 2x4 piece and put some Decoville Heavy in there, put my magnetic strap, folded it in half, stitched around. After I stitched, I trimmed it, and then I put some edge coat on it on both sides. So this raw edge is going to get stuck in the seam, and then our bag is going to snap closed. Now, while we're on the subject of edge paint, I want to show you something. I had bought a edge coat applier back a while ago, and it was a actually I'm going to show you what it is. So this is the applier that I bought, and you're supposed to dip it in your edge coat and just roll it across the top, and it's supposed to apply the edge coat. And I really hated it. I could not. You can see it almost looks a little bent. That's the way it came, but I just didn't like it. So I ended up going to using a Q-tip, which is okay, but the Q-tip, when you dip it in the paint and go to spread it on, the Q-tip sucks the paint up. So you don't have a lot of extra to put on the edge coat, and you end up, or on the edge, and you end up having to put more coats. So after thinking about it and watching some things, I thought, you know, I'm gonna try something else. I think for whatever reason, this is just a bad one. So I ended up buying this one. And this one, as you can see, it has a pointed top on it. And it's got these ridges in it. And I can tell you, this one is 1,000 times better than this one. And I think the difference is the point and the ridges. This has like little, it almost looks like a nail file type thing, but these ridges are great and this point is awesome. So if you are trying to decide what kind to get, I would highly recommend the pointed one. The other thing is I had some edge coat that I had just got at Michael's. It was just the Feinberg's regular edge coat, and it worked fine. But I went ahead and I bought this. It's Vernis, I guess, V-E-R-N-I-S, Vernis Edge Paint. And I got this from Rocky Mountain Leather, and it comes in a variety of colors. Now, I bought black to try it. I also bought a beige, and it's really, really light, so I'm not too crazy about the color. But this edge coat is really nice. I really like it. I'm going to probably just stick to this edge coat in the future. So I will link this in the description below. I will try to find one of these. I just got this on Amazon, link that for you. But these two together work great to edge coat. So just for reference. Okay, so then, and I do have a pattern change for you. The straps that go around the back to pull it, to cinch it, I told you to cut them 3/4 of an inch by 14 inches. That's not enough to go around the back. I'm not sure what I was thinking there. You need to cut them 3/4 of an inch by 30 inches. So I have 2 of those straps. And what I did was I folded them in half, stitched down the middle of the lace, and then I edged coat. So I've got 2 of those. Don't put your ends on yet. You gotta wait for that. So we got 2 of those. You have 2 lining pieces. Now, one thing that I can tell you on the lining, this is a small bag. It's only, the pattern we did was only like 8 by maybe 8. I mean, it's about 5 inches deep, and I don't want mine to be quite that deep. I'm going to take my 2.75 inches and make it smaller, but it's really a very small, compact bag. So you don't want to put a lot of pockets in there, because the pockets are just going to get in the way as you try to cinch it. It's not going to cinch real good. So I did put 1 zipper pocket in there, but as you see, you know, a zipper pocket isn't going to cinch the same way that something with no pocket will cinch. So just keep that in mind. Don't put too many pockets, or maybe even don't put any pockets at all. Like I said, I went ahead and did 1 zipper pocket, and that's it. I'm not doing any kind of slip pocket, anything like that. So you need 2 lining pieces, and you're going to need 2 upper lining pieces. So we're going to sew these together, right sides together, and we're going to put our little magnetic closure in there, and that's how we're going to sew that together. So I'll show you how to do that when we get to it. But on your pattern, if you remember when we did our pattern, we had fold lines to cut these 2 pieces, both the top and the bottom lining. Okay? And then you need 2 top pieces. Now, I went ahead and I quilted the first top piece. This is what it's gonna end up looking like. I didn't worry about my squares, my corner, square corners where I was gonna cut or anything like that yet. I didn't really worry about going all the way to the end either because those are gonna be cut off. I'm gonna show you how to make marks on your vinyl or your fabric or leather or whatever it is that you're doing to stitch this. And then I ended up using just my walking foot industrial machine for this. I was going to use my domestic machine for it. And I decided in the end not to do that because I wanted this thread and the weight of the thread to look the same as the top stitching. So the walking foot machine works fine for it. And if you have that and you're going to stitch the bag with it, you can certainly use it without a problem. So you're gonna have 2 top pieces. Now this one I haven't done anything with yet because I'm gonna show you what we're gonna do. Those are, besides our hardware, those are all our pieces. So you're gonna cut your pieces out and you can cut them out just a little bit bigger than what you want it and then trim them up later. You're going to cut a piece of batting, or this is Pellon, some really lightweight sew-in interfacing, Pellon interfacing. So all I did is I took some 505 spray and I just sprayed it on the batting, and then I laid my piece of vinyl on top. So now everything's attached, and that just helps it not shift when you're sewing. Now the other thing you're going to need, or one way, there's plenty of ways to transfer these lines on the pattern piece. There's plenty of ways to transfer these lines on the bag. You could just use your ruler and mark them with chalk, just basically remeasure them. You could fold them, make a line, fold it, make a line, fold it, make a line. You can do it that way. Or you can use this thing called Saral paper. It's S-A-R-A-L, Saral paper. And what it is, it's like a transfer paper. And on one side, it's just like almost like a wax paper, but on the other side, it's chalk. So if I run my finger across here, you can see some chalky residue on there. Okay? So remember back when, or at least back when I was learning how to sew, we used to have those tracing wheels and the carbon paper, and they probably still have that. It's kind of the same thing, only you don't want to use that wheel with the little divots in it, because it's going to make marks on your fabric, especially if you're using leather or vinyl. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to line this up. On my piece, and then I'm going to line my pattern up on my piece. Now I'm not going to pin this down or anything like that, but I am going to put something heavy on it so it doesn't shift. Okay. Then I'm going to take this stylus, and basically a stylus is just something that kind of looks like a pen, and it's got these little ball points at the end. It's just a metal ball. This one has one that's a little bit bigger than the other. I also have another one like this that's similar, and it's metal, and I use it to help poke out my corners when I turn things. I'm going to take my ruler, and all I'm going to do is place it on the line. And I'm going to use my stylus, so you don't have to press real hard, and you're just going to go ahead, draw the line. Now you're not making a mark on the paper again. All you're doing is tracing over it, and the pressure is putting the chalk, transferring the chalk from the bottom of this paper onto the vinyl or leather or whatever you may be using. So I'm going to go through and do this before I take it off, because if it shifts, it's going to be hard to line back up. And you can reuse this paper. I used it for the last, when I top stitched my other top, and I'm just reusing the same piece. You can just kind of keep using it until all the chalk is gone and it stops making marks on your papers for you, or on your fabric for you. Okay. Okay, so now we're done these lines. We're going to go over here and do these. Now these lines are only going to go to this long first line that I did going across the front. And again, this is your bag. You can do whatever you want. You can actually, again, I think I'm going to make one that goes all the way down and maybe it has diamonds down here and then just the lines going up. I think that would be really cute. I'm going to have to try that. You could also just do some kind of quilting pattern on there using rulers, or you could do some stippling on there. You can embroider something on it. You can definitely embroider leather and vinyl and all of those things. So that would be another option. So just think about, you know, what you would like, and the whole idea behind why we do this is because we're creative and we can make things exactly the way we want them, whether it's bags or clothes or quilts or whatever it may be. Now, I think this paper comes in other colors. I'm using white right now, and white's actually the only color I have, but I think it comes in like blue, so that if you're using a white piece of fabric, obviously white is not going to show up. And it comes on a roll, kind of like wax paper, like saran wrap. It comes in a container like that. Okay, so now that we've done that, we're going to take this off. We're going to remove this. And there are all our lines, okay? So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to take this over to the machine, and I'm going to start by stitching this long line. I'm going to go in the same direction every time. I'm going to start up here, I'm going to go down, cut my thread. Start up here, go down, cut my threads. Keep doing that. And then we're going to start here and go this way for this side. And I'll show you how to do that. Make sure you make a new bobbin because you're going to need it. I think when I did my little tester bag, I think I went through 3 bobbins. And this isn't a ton of quilting, but you go through it quick. So we're going to move over the machine and do that. Okay, so here we are at the machine. We are ready to go. I'm going to start up here in this corner, and I'm just going to stitch all the way down. Oh, look at that. Go ahead and replace my bobbin. And make sure you do what I say, not what I do, and I'll be back. All of the stitching in this direction is done. Now, you don't want to back stitch at either end. And you're not going to have to worry about it because these are all going to be captured in a seam anyway. So you're going to be stitching over it. It's not going to come out. So what we're going to do now is I'm going to show you how I start here and go up. You want to leave long tails when you start here because you're going to pull your threads to the back and tie them off. So I am going to close as I can here. Same thing here. So I'm going to continue down and do the rest of these, and then I'm going to take my threads and I'm going to pull them through to the back. I'm going to tie them off, tie each one off all the way down. So I'll do that and come back. All the stitching is done. I went ahead and tied off all my little ends. And when I tie them, I don't cut it all the way down to the knot. I think it just, if you do that, you have a better chance of it coming undone. So I just leave little ends here. Nobody's going to see it. It'll be okay. And then I trimmed my sew-in interfacing all the way around the edges. I did trim a little extra off the top. Basically, I just folded this down as far as it would go and just went straight across. Okay, so now I have my two sides completed. Pretty good. So we can actually sew these together. Clips here. Now remember when we made the pattern, we added a 1/2 inch seam allowance. So that's what I'm going to stitch. Now, oh, the other thing I meant to tell you too is that when we did our pattern, we did our lines every inch apart, and I decided that was too little for me. The pattern wasn't, it was just too far apart. So I ended up adding another line in the middle. So my lines are actually every 1/2 inch apart. So if you like the look of that, you want to go ahead and do that to your bag as well. Now when you connect your sides, your pattern is not going to match up exactly because we sewed these lines in the same direction, these long lines in exactly the same direction. However, you will notice that they're pretty close when you go to match these up. I don't know if you can see that, but they're pretty close. So I'm just going to kind of cheat this a little bit to make it so that they're close to being even, matching up. Doesn't have to be exact, but I just think that it'll make the bag look nicer if these lines are somewhat lined up. Okay, and same thing on the other side. Now I ended up just using one layer of batting or interfacing here. Experiment and see what you like. You might find out that you like the loftiness of two better. If you are using a very thin cork, you know, some of the corks that are out right now are like ultra thin, you might need 2 layers of batting. So just kind of gauge that based on what, you know, how thick your material is. This is a vinyl, and it's actually from Joann Fabrics, believe it or not. Saw it on sale. It was a nice color, and so I got it and thought, I like that. So what we're going to do now is just stitch our sides closed at a 1/2 inch seam allowance. Now, if you remember on our pattern, we had a stop stitch that we added on here. So I'm going to make sure I mark that and stop stitching here, or start stitching here and go down, and the same thing on the other side. So I'm going to go get my pattern, I'm going to mark what that is, and then I'm going to stitch my side seams, and make sure you back stitch at the top, and it doesn't matter if you back stitch at the bottom, because we're going to go ahead and we're going to cut our little squares out here in just a little bit. But make sure you stop stitching. I have the side seam stitched, and you can see I stopped, so I have a little opening up here at the top. Okay. So now what we're going to do is we're going to stitch our bottom closed, and we're going to do a 1/2 inch seam allowance, and we're just going to go down the bottom, and then we're going to end up cutting out our little corners and boxing our corners. Okay, so there we have it. We just sewed each side and the bottom. So to cut out your squares, you can do it a couple of different ways. You can use your ruler and just measure up and over, or you can use the little square ruler that I showed you, or you can actually use your pattern piece. Put your pattern piece on there. You can fold this up, line everything up, draw a line, and do the same thing, fold it sideways and draw a line. That's probably the least accurate way. I think I would use a ruler for it. And I think I would further use a square ruler. So you can either use your large ruler that you cut with, or you can use one of these little square rulers like what we used to make the pattern. Now we have a seam allowance here, obviously, and you need to figure out how deep you want your bag. That's what this does. This creates the depth of the bag. So if you want your bag to be, say, 4 inches deep, then from your seam allowance, you would cut your square 2 inches. I think I want my bag to be about 1.5 inches deep. So from my seam allowance, I'm going to measure 1.5 inches in each direction. I'm going to mark that. Since we're doing a 1/2 inch seam allowance, it's 2 inches from the side. 2 inches from the side, 1.5 inches from the seam allowance. So I'm going to go ahead and do the same thing over here. Okay. So now we're going to cut those out. One, two, okay, and that probably looks familiar to you if you've been making bags. You've seen these box corners before. So we're just going to spread this open. We're going to match up our seams, and you can either open your seam allowance here, or you can open your or you can put one to one side and one to the other side if you want to do that. I think that's how I'm going to do it. If you do that, one just kind of, one fits right into the other, and then you can just clip that down. Now the whole idea with this bag is because it cinches, you don't want it to be too stiff. So just be careful when you're trying to figure out what kind of fabrics to use, and what kind of interfacings. You want to make sure that you use something that's fairly soft. So the Ultra Leathers by Badabling would be great for this. I probably would have used them because I've used them for so many of my bags. I just ran out. So before you sew it, go ahead and kind of stand it up. See if you like the figure of it. If it's looking tall and skinny or short and fat or wide or what. And this will cinch up. I think I like that. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to stitch a 1/2 inch seam allowance. Now, if you don't open your seams, if you choose to lay them down, just make sure your bottom seam is going in the same direction on both sides so that it's not fighting when you go in 2 different directions. And it doesn't matter if you sew with the top up or the bottom up, either way will be fine. And in addition to that, I'm also going to do a second row of stitching right in the inside, but near this row, just to kind of give it a little extra support, and then hopefully it will also prevent the stitches from pulling apart and showing on the front side. And I just think that this is a high stress area. Okay. So you see there, just 2 rows of stitching. So I'm just going to trim this down a little bit. I'm going to go ahead and do my other side, and then we'll be able to start on the lining. I did do a zipper pocket here, and I'm not going to show you how to do that. There's so many tutorials out there on how to do that, and there's so many different ways to install a zipper. If you just look on YouTube, you can go to Size Swag, you can go to Lauren Mormino, Jess Oakley Roots. There's quite a few ladies out there that do a great job with that, and that can show you how to do it. So I'm here to show you hopefully some things that they haven't shown you, and that way you're not watching the same type of videos over and over again. So I'm going to find my center and clip it in both pieces. Now, this connector is actually going to go face up like this on both pieces, because what happens is when the bag closes to cinch, these 2 are going to go together like that. Okay, so I'm going to just clip this, sew a basting stitch, and then I'm going to go ahead and sew my top piece of my lining on and top stitch it. And then we're going to put this piece on. Okay, and now we're going to flip this up, and I'm going to top stitch that. You want to do the same thing with this piece. You want to go ahead and base this on, put this piece, top piece on, flip it up, and top stitch. Now, when you flip this up, you're going to make sure that your seam is going up towards the vinyl piece or your top piece of the bag when you top stitch. You're actually going to be top stitching on the vinyl piece. Okay, so we'll go ahead and do that, and then move on to the next step. Now we have our 2 lining pieces done, ready to go. So I'm going to go ahead and clip them together. and then line up my sides to sew. Now, I'm going to show y'all how I make sure my sides line up. I see this question a lot on the Facebook groups, and you know, people say, well, I clip these and I make sure that, you know, it's all good, and when I start stitching, they move and they never line up exactly. How do you get them to line up exactly? I'm going to show you how I do mine. So what I do is, of course, I make sure they're lined up exactly right, and I put a clip right there on that. Okay. Then I clip the rest of the bag just like normal. Do the same thing on the other side. Make sure they're lined up exactly right. And clip. Okay. So my trick is that I don't start here and I don't start here. I start right there. I literally will put my needle in right at that point and then back stitch up and forward stitch down. Or if it's too long of a distance, you know, you can start here, go down, then you can turn this around and go here and go back up, however you want to do it. But the key is you put your needle in right here, and once you put your needle in, it can't shift, and that's where you start. So let me show you. Now, at the top of this, I'm going to use a 1/2 inch seam allowance, just like the bag. This part here. Okay, and remember, we have our stop stitch as well. So actually, when I stitch this, I'm not going all the way up to the top. We have to make sure we mark where we're going to stop stitching, and that just happens to be right about at that seam, just right above that seam. And in fact, I need to mark, you can't even see it because it's right there. So what I'm going to do literally is just start right there, back stitch right here to this line, my little stop stitch line in pink, and then go all the way down. I'm going to start it at a 1/2 inch, and then I'm going to increase my seam allowance. So before I even take my clip off, I'm going to stick that needle in, and then take the clip off. I'm just going to go right to that stop stitch. Actually, it's a little beyond it. Again, okay. All right, so let me show you. See, it matches up exactly right. So that's what you want to do, is just start at that point. It'll work every time. Now, we need to put our strap connectors right here on the side. I'm going to go ahead and put this one in now, just to make it easier, because once we sew up this side, we're going to have to reach in there to connect it. It's going to be a little more difficult. You really want to make sure your seam allowance is open. And if you notice, we do not trim our seam allowances, and there's a reason for that. Because this seam here is going to open up, and it's going to create our little V, and that's going to be the side of our, you know, we're going to put these together with the front, and that's going to be our edge there. So you want to make sure that on the bag, on the face of the bag, and on the lining, do not cut your seam allowances. But you do want to open them up. And that's what's going to help create the side for this. So when you stitch the opener, or excuse me, the strap on, you want to make sure that your seam allowance is open. And then I'm just going to go ahead and line it up, line the top of the strap up with the very edge of the bag. Okay, so the top of this is just lined up with the edge. And now we're just going to stitch around, and then I'm probably going to put a couple of rivets in there. So again, make sure your seam allowance is open. If it's going to help you to put a little bit of double-sided tape on here to keep it open, that's fine. Go ahead and do that. So there is our first strap connector on. Now the second one's going to be a little trickier, but it's doable. Okay, so I'm going to put 2 rivets, and then I'm going to sew my other side, and then we'll come back to put the strap connector on. Change the angle of the camera. Hopefully you can see it better. It's hard, I know sometimes when we sew we have our hands in the way and it's hard to see, so hopefully this is a little bit better. So I have this, I need to still press my rivets in, but I have this strap connector on, okay, with my rivets ready to go. I sewed up my other side, made sure I did my stop stitch. Don't forget to do your stop stitch. And now I'm going to, I went ahead and use double-sided tape to get this one on. I'm going to open up my seam allowance, and I'm going to sew this one on. Now this gets a little bit tricky, but it's okay. You can do this, no problem. Just go slow and mush your bag down. Now I'm sure you saw I'm using waterproof canvas for my lining. So really there's no the only kind of interfacing or anything we're using was the sew-in interfacing for when on the base of the bag, on the face of the bag. Otherwise we're not using any interfacing because we want the bag to be kind of soft and smushy. So now the other thing I haven't told you yet, because I don't want to scare anybody, but we're going to do a drop-in lining in this bag, and it's actually really not that hard in this bag. I know some bags it is, but in this bag it's not. So I'll show you how we do it. Don't get scared. Don't hope I didn't just scare you off, but just stick with me and we'll get through it, okay? So we're gonna go ahead and sew this one on. Now one more stitch. Over. Up. Over. Okay, oops, don't forget to protect your hardware and your vinyl here. Okay, and we have our second connector on. And it is just as pretty as the first. So I'm gonna go ahead and make some marks, put some rivets in here, put my rivets down, and then we're going to sew the bottom of the bag and do our little cutouts on the bottom. So we've got the lining done. Okay. And now what we need to do is either put some Peltex or Decabo Heavy in the bottom of this bag so that it has got some stability on the bottom. So the size of that Peltex or Decabo Heavy is going to depend on how big you cut your corners. So what you need to do is to just take a little measuring tape and measure the final width of the bag here. So mine is, I'm gonna probably cut mine 3 3/4. And then you wanna measure this way. You wanna go from your inner stitch line to your inner stitch line. And that is, for me, about 9 3/4. So I'm going to cut a piece 3 3/4 by 9 3/4, and then I'm going to turn this bag around and I'm going to stick that in there. I'm going to glue it down. I have the Decabo, I actually use Decabo Heavy glued on the bottom here. And before we turn this bag around, we want to go ahead and measure. First of all, we're going to put some double-sided tape on the side here so that when we fold these edges over, they'll stick on each side, okay? But we also want to go ahead and mark 1 inch down from the top on both our main bag and our lining. And that's going to be where we fold it down to so that we can do the drop-in lining and we get our edges to match up. So I'm just going to flatten them back out here and put my ruler on, do this way, and just make a mark 1 inch down. Okay, so you should see my line there. And do that on both sides. Now the reason why we're doing 1 inch is because we had a 1 inch seam, excuse me, a 1/2 inch seam allowance when we did our pattern. So that's another reason why you want to cut the sewing interfacing out, because you don't want to have to be folding the interfacing in, you don't have to want to be folding the interfacing in with this. If this went all the way up to the top, you'd have a lot of thickness there. We don't want that. So once you do that, you can go ahead and put, I use 1/2 inch double-sided tape for this because it'll, 1/4 inch obviously will work, but the 1/2 inch, you're folding over the exact width of the tape. So you've got a line and you've got the tape, and so you should be pretty accurate when you do your fold over. Now before I even put the tape on the top, I'm gonna go ahead and put some tape right here on the sides so that I can fold these sides in. When I put the tape on, I actually put the tape on the inside of the bag, not on the seam allowance part, but on the inside of it. And then when you pull off the tape, or excuse me, when you pull off the backing here, you can take and just fold this all the way over good and tight to that. Okay. And then we're going to do the same thing here. Okay. So that's Those are going to be our corners going up. So now we want to go ahead and put our double-sided tape on the top here. I'm going to put it right on the edge. Double-sided tape is your friend when you're doing your drop-in lining. At least it's my friend. I'm sure there are people who are able to do these drop-in linings without using it because they're super duper experts, but that is not me. I have to admit. And of course it helps if you have a cylinder arm machine, which I do not have, although I would love one. Okay, so now we want to go ahead and pull the tape off, fold this down to our line, which should be the exact width of our tape, all the way down. Okay, on the other side as well. Now, when you do this, obviously you should see your edges matching up. And if you do, then you know you're doing a good job. Okay. So now we have our seam, or we don't have a seam, we have our fold over all ready to go. So I'm going to go ahead and do this to the lining as well. Then before we actually drop the lining in and sew it, we need to obviously turn this back around. Actually, we can do that right now. Let's do that. Let's see what it's going to look like here. Okay. Edges out here. Oh, how cute. Very cute. So you see at this point, of course we don't have our hardware on yet, but doesn't it look like that picture I showed you of the pink bag? It's just a boxed, it's just a box bag. That's how it starts. And then of course when you cinch it is when you get the bucket bag look. So I'm going to go ahead and make sure your edges are even. See, this edge looks like it needs to come down just a little bit. Sure this edge is even, it is. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and do the same thing with the lining by putting the double-sided tape on here and then folding, marking an inch from the edge, folding the edge over. And then we're going to come back and we're going to put our hardware on because we want to put that on before we drop this in. It is hardware time. So these strap keepers come with a washer and 2 little screws. We need to make sure we put this on the inside of the bag, obviously, before we stitch our lining in. Now we marked on our bag, on our pattern, we marked like 2 inches down, which is okay. And we can go ahead and put a little mark on our bag 2 inches down. Just so we can kind of get a rough idea of where we think it's going to go. Just make sure you use the disappearing pen here. I'm going to put a teeny tiny little mark right there. Okay. So before I start making holes in the bag, I want to, I'm going to move you over a little bit. see this better. Okay, I want to take my lace here, and when this goes around the side of the bag, it needs to go right about where the bag starts to close up here. We don't want it way up here, obviously, and we don't want it way down here. We need it right about at that spot. So I'm just going to kind of take this, clip it in place. And actually, it looks like I made my bag a little wider. It looks like I probably should have made my little strings a little, or my laces a little wider too. Make sure on both ends it's where we want it. And that is right at my dot. That is amazing. So basically, these are going to go like this. So we had them 2 inches apart on our pattern based on those measurements. I think that on mine, I'm going to want to extend that to about 3 inches apart. So just double check it, you know, just kind of do a little test thing here to make sure that you like the spacing. Obviously we know we need one in the middle. And then if I do 3 inches, 3 inches, I think that looks good. Okay. Now, so I'm going to mark each one of these. And then I'm going to go ahead and put holes in the bag, put the washers and the screws in. And I'm just going to put it through the face of the bag. I'm not going to put it through to the lining. When I first looked at putting this bag together, I thought about that and I thought, I think I need to put it through the lining because otherwise it won't cinch up. But your lining's going to be stitched up here, so you're going to be fine. So all of our pretty hardware is on. And what we're going to do now, I put obviously the lining in, matched everything up. Now, if you want to put double-sided tape on these edges to hold them together, you can do that. But just keep in mind, you already have 2 layers of double-sided tape. One on the front to hold it down, one on the back to hold it down. That would make it a 3rd. I'm sure, you know, if you've got a machine like this, it'll go through it, no problem. But just keep in mind that your needle's probably going to get gummed up and you're going to need to be cleaning your needle as you go along. So I am not going to put any double-sided tape on there. All we're going to do right now is we're just going to top stitch down here, and we're just going to top stitch here. We're not going to worry about these sides yet. Because of these slits, it's actually easy to do. You're just going to stitch a straight line, and you're going to fold. Let me show you here. You're going to fold this edge in like this. And then we're just going to put this edge under the machine and we're going to top stitch. Now don't back stitch. You're just going to go ahead and start stitching here. We'll pull our threads through here and tie them off. And then we're going to go all the way to here. Again, do not back stitch. You don't have to worry about the sides tucked in. Okay, easy enough. So we're just going to go ahead and do that. these long tails. And looky there. Looks good. Okay, so we're going to do the same thing on this side. We're going to take this, we're going to fold it in. And then we're going to go ahead and top stitch this end. So there we go. So now, that's where we get a little tricky. Because of these, let me open this back up here in case I want to shut. Because of our strap connectors, we really need to sew this from the inside. We're just going to go down, go across, and come back up. If not, this strap connector is probably going to get caught and we're going to have some problems. So I'm going to make sure everything looks like it's lined up good. Maybe add another. And I'm just going to, here, let me pull these through first and tie them off. And then we want to start in that same hole and come down. So I'm just going to this up just a little bit. Oh, one came through, one didn't. There we go. Tie this off. So we're going to, from this side, see what we can do here. Let's see. So we're going to, first of all, I'm going to move you just a little bit and see if we can get a little bit better angle. Okay, so I'm going to go right in this same hole again, come down. All right, I'm going to put my needle in here. I can see my needle. I need to go get my glasses too. There we go. All right, so I'm right in the hole. I'm going to kind of flatten this bag out. Okay, so we're going to come down first, and we're going to go all the way till we get to the bottom of the inside of the vinyl, kind of where our vinyl and our waterproof canvas meet. I'm sorry, I know you keep seeing my arm. I'm trying to get you so you can see it really good. What I'm doing here. Okay, so I'm going to pull this up. Let me raise you. Maybe that'll be better. I know that this is hard to see. Hold on. Okay. And we're going to go right down to this water where this waterproof canvas is. Then we're going to go across, and then we're going to go back up. Now you're gonna have to pull your strap connector out of the way just a little bit. Okay, now left we're gonna turn. And see, you're actually going underneath where your strap connector is. You're just gonna kind of pull that down a little bit and go right underneath there. And then we're going to turn. Now this is where it gets really a little difficult because you really have to push that strap connector out of the way. Okay, and then we're going to come up over here and try to end in the same hole we started in. Half a stitch left here. I'm going to turn it and I'm going to go in this direction, just one or two stitches here. Okay. So there. We have our end. Okay. I'm going to do the same thing on the other side. I'm going to move the camera to the front and maybe you'll be able to see it a little bit better. Okay, y'all, we're going to try this and see if you can see this a little bit better because I know it's so hard to see. I'm going to actually start in this direction. Make sure I go in the same hole I was in. Now we're going to turn the bag and we're going to come straight down. I'm going to pull the strap connector back just a little bit. We're going to sew till we get down to where we meet our waterproof canvas. Okay, turn. Straighten out here. I'm going to take a couple stitches. Bring it up a little bit. There we go. And I'm pulling back my strap connector here. Turn again. And I don't think that angle's any better, is it? Here, let me swing you around this way. This is just some tough, sometimes some tough stuff to film, I have to admit. And if y'all have any suggestions for me, please do not hesitate to let me know. I'm going to try to go back in that same hole. A little bit of light so I can see the hole. Okay. Okay, there we are, right there. Okay, I'm going to swing you back around one more time. I hope you don't get seasick. I do, so I know if you do, I know the feeling. Okay. So, I'm going to, let's see, tie off these ends here. This one's already in a knot. Take that down. Okay. Okay. So, here we are. I'm going to put my strap. So you're going to put it in one way, you're going to wrap it around, and then you're going to put it down the other side. And I need my other one, which is right here, and it's going to go the opposite way. So this one's going to go here. Here, like so. And if you remember from the, I'm just going to put a clip here right now. If you remember from the picture, our inspiration picture, it's not a tight cinch. It's just a kind of a gradual, just a small, you know, a little bit of a cinch. Okay, so actually, one thing I forgot to tell you to cut, and I forgot to cut, are the strap ends here so that it'll stay cinched when you cinch it. And I think that it probably takes a little bit of, you gotta stuff the bag first of all, that will help. Cute, 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 cute. Okay, so we need to make little, I don't really know what they're called, little end pieces here so that when we cinch the bag, they'll stay closed. And then we can put our, afterwards, after we get that on, we can put our end connectors here on. So basically, it's 2 inches that I folded in and each edge, and then I top stitched. And then I cut this to 3 inches. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to fold one edge into the center, and I'm going to fold the other edge so that it looks like about like that. okay? So one raw edge is inside there, and the other raw edge is up here covering. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to stitch down, over, up, and over, just so that I grab both of these ends. Now before you do that, you want to test and make sure that once you stitch it, your ends are still going to fit in. And you might have to adjust the width of this just a little bit. Again, you want it tight, because if it's too loose, it's not going to cinch. Okay. Let's try this. And you do want to back stitch on this. Turn and come over one. And come back down. Get my little tails out of the way here. And then I'm just going to come up and do a little back stitch here. So that's what we end up with. And the bottom is going to go in the back, so you're not going to see. You're not going to see that. I mean, I guess you would if you turned it over, but. So now I'm going to feed this through. So we are now cinched up with just our little ends, and all the clips are gone. Very cute. So now we can finally put our little strap ends on. Before I did this, before I made these or finalized these laces, I double checked to make sure that my ends would fit on here. And every end fit. Now, of course, before you do that, make sure you like the length, because if you need to cut them, now's the time to cut them. But I think that that's okay, because when you open up the bag, you don't want them sticking out too much. I think that actually, I think those are pretty good length. I think that's going to be good. And then switch it up. Just move these up. Isn't that cute? It's just cute. Okay, so the ends, I'm just going to put a little bit of glue. Go ahead and put the ends on, and then there's little screws that come with these strap ends. Screw the screws in, and the bag will be completed. Then from there, I am going to do the crossbody, and I'm going to actually do a buckle on the crossbody. So I'm going to show you how to do that, because I don't think I've seen anybody do that. I don't think I've seen anybody install a buckle on a crossbody. Most of them have just been the crossbody adjusters, the regular adjuster strap. So let me do this, and then we'll work on that strap. Okay, to make a crossbody strap with a buckle, you start out the same way as if you were going to do it with a strap adjuster. You just make one long crossbody strap, fold the edges in, top stitch down each edge. Then what you're going to do is you're going to put a swivel clip on each end. And I riveted mine on. Once you do that, you're going to measure 12 inches from the tip of your swivel clip and cut it. Just cut it in half. Then you're going to measure 1.5 inches down from your cut edge, and you're going to put a hole right in the middle. So 1.5 inches is right about here. And I'm just going to put a hole right here in the middle. Okay. You're going to take your buckle and you're going to put the tongue, I guess you call it the tongue, through the hole, through the buckle, and you're going to stitch or rivet that down. Okay. So I'm just gonna, for right now, go ahead and put a rivet in there. And let me rivet that down. So now this is what we have. I'm going to go back and edge coat that after. Then on this end, you can either leave it raw, you know, and edge coat it. You can put a strap end on it, which I'm probably going to do that. And then this is what you're going to thread through, and then you're going to put holes in this side every, you know, however inch, 2 inches, so that you can buckle this down and then you can adjust it by the holes. So let me go ahead and I figure the first hole probably you need to have some, so let's say we put the first hole right up there. So when you do this, that's what you have. Now we need to make a strap keeper for right here so that this isn't just flaring around. And to do that, you want to cut a piece. Okay, wait a minute, I have this backwards. I'm going to put it in this way. Okay. So to do that, you're going to want to cut a piece of your vinyl, and you probably want it 1 inch, and you're going to fold the edges in and top stitch around. Then you're going to wrap it. You're going to wrap it around here to figure out how wide, you know, how wide the whole thing needs to be, because you want it to be able to fit around not just this part, but these to hold this down. So it needs to be, you know, at least the thickness to go through 4 of these. Once you figure that, you're just going to rivet it on the back. So let me go ahead and show you how to do that. I'll go ahead and cut one. So you want to cut it 1 inch wide, and then you're going to, like in this case, this is a 1 inch, so you're going to cut it probably 2.5 inches. Okay, so I ended up cutting mine 5 inches because I realized 2.5 inches wasn't going to do it. So I just took the 1 inch piece, folded the edges to the middle, and then stitched down both sides. So now what I'm going to do is take the strap. I'm going to fold this around. To see how long I need it. Now you want, basically what you want are these two ends to overlap in the back. So you see I have extra. We want it to be tight, of course, but not so tight that you're not going to be able to get the strap in. So that's what we want it to look like. We want it to kind of overlap. And then we're going to put 2 little mini rivets in there to hold that together because we're not going to be able to get in there so. So I'm just going to cut this off. I'm going to cut it off a little bit long here to start. Make sure that I'm okay with this. Put a little clip on there. Okay, that looks about right. So now I'm going to cut off my other little end right here. Okay. So now what I'm going to do is to just get my end in there and punch at least 1 hole on the end here. Okay, I'm going to get a little mini rivet. Stick it in, put the cap on. Make sure that's going to be okay. So I'm going to go ahead and put 1 more hole over here so I can put 1 more rivet. Now, I have to admit to y'all, usually I do this before I rivet my belt buckle on. It would be a lot easier, obviously. It's getting late and I'm tired, so I guess that's probably why I did not do that. I was not thinking straight. So I'm just going to press those rivets down. Go ahead and hit them down, and then put some more holes in here, put an end on here, and then my adjuster strap is done. So this will go like this will go like this. So hold that down, and then you have an adjustable strap. So, we put that strap on. So y'all can see what it looks like. Now, one thing I have to say are these things are pretty good because they have some weight on them, so they pull it down so they're not sticking straight out like a scarecrow. That's kind of a good thing. Isn't it cute? It's really cute. It kind of has a little life of its own, doesn't it? Okay. So I hope that you enjoyed the tutorial on how to make this bag. Do some different things with it, and send me a photo. I would love to see what y'all do. It's Cris, C-H-R-I-S, at simplyclassic.net, and I think that, you know, y'all can take this and just run with it. And this was an idea, something to have a little fun with. And so now you need to make one and make it your own. So get inspired, subscribe, please. If you haven't subscribed yet, go ahead and subscribe. Give me a thumbs up. Visit my website, simplyclassic.net. And if you have any questions, leave them in the comments below. Otherwise, get inspired and happy sewing.